UKZN lecturer in public policy and political science, Dr. Fikile Vilakazi, joins us now to have a little more discussion on this. Dr. Vilakazi, thanks for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, Sakina, and good morning to the viewers.
Dr. Vilakazi, let's just start by taking the temperature in KwaZulu-Natal in the lead up to this weekend's very important conference. The current atmosphere, activities within the ANC and KZN as the province gears up for these provincial elections?
Well, I mean, there's high tempo as usual. KZN is a very, very interesting province when it comes to the politics of the African National Congress. The Provincial Executive Committee has been having plenary meetings, preparing for the conference to take place. And there's been a lot of work that has happened also in regions, really after, around March early, preparing also for their involvement at the conference. Recently, we also have seen that branches have also been consolidating their own processes internally to ensure that they have proper credentials to be able to participate at the conference. So there has been a lot of momentum building up and so on. And of course, there are questions around the issue of the participation of the Women's League, given the fact that the National Executive Committee recently has put a national task team. They've disbanded the Women's League, so there are questions about whether the Women's League will be able to participate here. And we've seen also the Youth League rallying behind Umama Ozandile Gumede once more, saying and vowing that they will challenge the step-aside resolution, that has been amended to ensure that people who have charges against their names do not ever again stand for positions. So the Youth League is committed to fighting that and ensuring that Mama Ozandile Gumede contests the treasury position. So it's quite interesting. There is that atmosphere happening here, and everybody's looking forward to the weekend.
So before we talk about the protagonists, Dr. Vilakazi, we know that since April, ANC branches in the province have been holding branch general meetings. And looking at what has emerged from there, it's also not a secret that there are slates making the rounds. How much of the individual views, would you say, are taken into consideration in the branch selection process? And, how important are these slates when it finally comes to selecting the top leadership structure in the province?
It's quite a very interesting dynamic that has emerged because at the previous provincial conference, we know, for instance, for the position of the chairperson, that really went through almost uncontested. And what we're seeing now is that branches are putting up names, and individuals themselves, like Sandile Zungu, are consulting with people like the former President Jacob Zuma. And we've heard also Umama Unomusa Dube in one of the speeches, she was speaking in one of the meetings, saying that they need to consult with the former leaders, like also former Minister Vilakazi, because they believe that these leaders are going to assist them to shape the renewal of the ANC, but also building the ANC project because of their experience. So there is that individual influence of leaders, like the former President Jacob Zuma and former Minister Vilakazi, that is playing itself in the background. We know also the leadership of the ANC in the province went to visit Nkandla recently also to discuss these issues, in terms of preparedness for the provincial conference. So there is that. And in terms of the slates, Sakina, my sense and my reading of it is that it is actually revealing the deepening divisions within the African National Congress, in terms of factions, in terms of ensuring that particularly the Radical Economic Transformation faction, which is very strong in the province, is not giving up its weight. It is ensuring that it has got the leaders and the bodies that would support that particular agenda, leading to the provincial conference itself, but also the national elective conference in December, and possibly the policy conference that is going to happen very soon, because it is about shaping the policy agenda of the African National Congress moving forward. Radical economic transformation as a policy issue being the top, in their psyche and in their minds. So that's what we are seeing, and I think it's a very interesting one. Then there's a gender question and a feminist question, because we're seeing Nomusa Dube, for example, contesting for chairpersonship. We've seen other branches and regions sending Umama Umloyi for the treasury position, for the secretariat position and treasury position. So, and Umama Uzandile Gumede as well for treasury position. So there are, cries to say, over time, it's 110 years, Sakina, the African National Congress has not really utilized effectively the leadership of the Youth League, but also the leadership of the Women's League within the African National Congress, of course, highlighting its weaknesses as a patriarchal institution, but also as an ageist organization. So there are those dynamics that I think the slates are showing us here. Young people really want to come and lead the organization. Women also would like to come. But then there's this cloud of allegations and corruption, of course, against certain names. But also there's a dynamic that businessmen and businesswomen, business people, like Sandile Zungu, rising up to say we want to lead politically the African National Congress. Honestly, bringing that atmosphere of skepticism because of the corruption climate that we are living under. We know President Cyril Ramaphosa also has those questions, around his name, because he's a businessman and he stood for presidency. So there's then policy questions that are facing this conference in particular, the provincial conference, but the policy conference that's upcoming around Section 96 of the Constitution, around the constitutional issue of the African National Congress itself internally. They need to resolve those questions of Section 25, the role of the Integrity Committee of the African National Congress, the fact that people who are businessmen like Usihle Zungu here who want to contest chairpersonship can stand for elections whilst earning another income, whereas Section 96 is very clear around those issues to say a person who is holding office should not be able to receive extra income elsewhere. It means that if you're a businessman, then you obviously are getting income from elsewhere. So there are those contradictions in policy, in legislation that would need to be reconciled, when it comes to bodies that contest for elections. Because if then the branches are voting for those kinds of people, they are clearly contravening certain sections of the Constitution, and therefore the process becomes unconstitutional generally in terms of the policy environment of South Africa, but also in terms of the policies of the African National Congress itself. So they would need to check their deployment strategies in the policy environment there.
And these contradictions are so rife, though, Dr. Vilakazi, because can anyone really stand there, sit there and say that they don't have any other stream of income? That's the one question. With regard to Sandile Zungu, he was in the race, then he apparently withdrew from the race, now he's back in the race. And looking at the other protagonists as well, you have Zandile Gumede and the whole issue around the step-aside rule, but the branches have come out and, they have said, well, her name is definitely in the hat. Sihle Zigalala, again, along with Zandile Gumede, these are seen as vying for those top positions. And then there is Dr. Zweli Mkhize. So it's going to be very interesting, given the sort of backstory to each of these four protagonists, at least.
Absolutely, Sakina. It's quite a challenging one because these are protagonists that are really highly favored within the province. And this is the thing. Then you have to look at the citizen, right? The power of the citizen in this particular instance, and what the citizen is asking from and needing from the African National Congress leadership. The citizen it doesn't seem to be worried about the character of the protagonist that is wanting to contest. People love Udokotela Uzweli Mkhize in KwaZulu-Natal. People love Umama Uzandile Gumede here. And then it raises those kinds of questions to say, actually, what is it that we vote for? in the country, right? It raises critical questions about the political atmosphere generally in the country to say the voting process is no longer just about service delivery, but it is also about the service of the survival of the fittest for certain individuals who then are able to translate their benefit from power into certain bodies within citizens, within communities and citizens. And I'm talking monetary value here. If you look at the African National Congress itself, it has shifted over time from being just a political organization to being an employer, to being an economic entity that many people rely on. Those who are employed by the African National Congress itself within branch offices, within regional offices, have to make sure that they vote for certain bodies because they have to keep their jobs, they have to keep their incomes. The politicians themselves, right, these are exiles who actually do not know any other job except being a politician. It means that then if you are going to lose that position, you really go back to the ranks of the unemployed. And who wants to have that fate? No one. So people will fight tooth and nail to ensure that these are preserved. And of course, then you look at the corruption element to say, as they benefit, we have seen in the Zondo Commission report, we have seen also by observation that then tenders go to certain people within communities and so on. And these are all the circles that will ensure that even if there's this cloud of corruption, the voting will just really be about preserving their own survival at this point in time. That's how delicate the situation of unemployment and poverty is in the country, because it plays itself also in our political decisions, just in terms of voting and putting certain people in power. It is about maintenance of our monetary status as well.
Right, we are at the end of our time allotted, Dr. Vilakazi, but I have to ask you, who do you think will emerge victorious, especially in the position of chairperson for KZN? Because we know the policy issues seem to have been relegated to the periphery, except for the step-aside rule because of how it is interfering with some of the candidates. And the ANC goes to that policy conference next week. But who do you think is likely to emerge here?
I see a high contestation between Usihle Zikalala and Nomusa Dube Ncube. Yeah, it's difficult to say which one of the two will make it, but I think Usihle Zikalala is likely to retain it.
Well, thanks so much, Dr. Fikile Vilakazi. And of course, we'll talk more because all of this will come to a head. We'll definitely be bringing you this conference over the weekend as SABC News. And thanks to UKZN lecturer in public policy and political science, Dr. Fikile Vilakazi, giving us her views on the ANC KZN elective conference that's coming up this weekend, and SABC will have you covered.